Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Motorcycle Sport Touring Association's October newsletter. This month, we will begin a brand new series on all things tires, and nobody better to talk about tires than TJ Tennent, better known as The Tyre. That's Tyre, The Tyre Guy. And of course, he can be reached at thetyreguy@yahoo.com. We thought we would do this segment because he's very well known in the field of automotive and car and truck and vehicles, and especially motorcycle tires. And I thought I'd have TJ spend a minute just telling a little bit about himself, so you know why it's going to be important to listen to what this guy says. TJ, welcome to our October newsletter for the Motorcycle Sport Touring Association.
Well, I spent 18 years. Thank you for inviting me, by the way. I spent
you're welcome.
18 years at the world's largest tire and rubber company. That was where I cut my teeth. And eventually, I was promoted here to Nashville, where I live now, which is where the corporate office is. And I was told they needed an engineering manager for the motorcycle program. And I was like, there's no job like that. And they said, oh, yeah, there is. We need you to be that guy. And so I was the engineering manager for the motorcycle program, which encompassed not just street tires, but also motorcycle racing tires. I had to go to a lot of the racing events and counsel the riders that used our tires. I did a lot of testing and development and really kind of taught myself because there was no one that I was replacing or anything. So I had a little steep learning curve, which is good because I remember all that stuff. And now I run my own company called Tennent, Winkleman and Associates, and we do tire forensics. So if a tire blows out and somebody dies, unfortunately, my phone will ring, and they'll usually want to know what happened with the tire. And we handle everything from motorcycle to passenger, like truck, commercial, off the road, farm equipment, you name it. And I really love doing it. So I'm kind of living my second life now.
A little bit of the backstory on how I met TJ many, many years ago, and I mean many, it seems like. Vintage Motorcycle Days held at Lexington, Ohio at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, held back-to-back weekends. And the first weekend was Vintage Motorcycle Days, which still continues to this day. And the second one was the Superbike Series. The circus would come to town, and you'd have back-to-back weekends of nothing but motorcycle bliss. And one day I was looking at the seminars and the schedule, and I went to the tire and I said, oh, look here, some guy's going to talk about motorcycle tires. So I went up there, and along with Roy Dykeman, my legendary co-host, we sat there and we were spellbound by what you had to say and how you delivered the message. And I said, boy, I'm going to make this guy my friend. And over the years, you've been kind enough to be on the Two Wheel Power Hour motorcycle show, giving us expert opinions and insights and what to do and what not to do. I've even called you many years later and said, hey, I'm thinking about buying these tires for a Corvette, but they've been around for about 9 years. They look really good. And you gave me some sound advice. So we're hopeful that this series about motorcycles, tires, and specifically, but we can get questions for other things, that this thing will grow, and we're going to embed it monthly into the Motorcycle Sport Touring newsletters. Now, TJ, one of the things that I first wanted to talk to you about is, and I'm going to say specifically BMW, but it could be any of these larger adventure touring bikes. A lot of my friends, they're newer in the late 20s, 21, 22, 23, 25s, they were running radial tires. And there recently, it seemed like a whole big push where knowledgeable guys are now running bias belted tires. And I know when you go into your owner's manual, it'll specify the size, the weight rating on the tire, speed ratings, things like that. But I've always in my career, both in racing and in just regular touring and that, not to switch, if your chassis and your bike is designed for radials, you should be in a radial. But I find now that a lot of people are not following that and actually are running bias belted tires specifically for they're heavier adventure touring tires that will see some off-road, maybe more than 20 or 30%. Maybe they're going to haul those big motorcycles and do maybe 40 or 50% off-road, but they still have to be DOT compliant. And I sent you a text on that, and I was shocked because you said, yeah, that might be all right. So I'm going to let you take it away, and let's talk the differences between radials and bias belted, and then you can tell us when it is okay to switch and maybe when it isn't.
There's basically two types of tires that are produced, and they are exactly what you said, radial and bias. But you can get a little deeper into biased and get into bias belted. Now, bias was the original type of tire that was produced for all vehicles, including motorcycle. And the advantage of having a bias tire on your motorcycles is if you're going to be off-road or you're going to have a heavy load. Bias tires handle the heavier loads and off-road better, especially if you're going to be running over sticks and rocks and
And why is that?
Because the plies kind of crisscross across the casing. And so that tire flexes more on the sidewall. So if I'm holding up this motorcycle tire right here, the sidewall is going to be a little bit taller. It's going to flex a little more versus a radial tire, which is going to be on almost all road use. There are a couple of tires. Continental makes a tire that same tire, but you can get it in a radial bias, and so does a few of the other manufacturers. But in a radial tire, it's going to have a belt. This is the belt on this radial tire, and if it's bias belted, so in the motorcycle name, you can tell if it's a bias belted or no belt by the name. And I'll give you an example. A 180 60-18 is a bias no belt. A 180 60B 18 is a bias with a belt. So that will have a belt on it similar to a radial tire. And that means that tire is for 50% or more on road. So if you're going to be on road 50% or less, you can go with a bias ply tire. Even if the manufacturer says something different, be sure though, if you've got spoked wheels, that tire can be used on that wheel, so you don't lose any air or anything.
Now, that's a good question, because I noticed that, there are, I've had a severe puncture where I couldn't plug it, but I was close enough to go to a Walmart or something and get a tube. And I put a tube in there. But I know that it's discouraged to do those types of things. And I'm sure that the way the bead gets hooked onto the rim has something to do with whether or not it's a tube tire or a tubeless tire. And I'm sure that the rims also dictate what type of. So could you expand on that?
That is such a great question and a good point that I really need to make. There's a couple of different types of tubes. Most people don't know that there's a radial type tube and a bias type tube. And the difference is the frequency of those tubes and how they flex. Because the radial tube would be like this hand right here. It can flex at a higher rate than the bias tube. So you can put a radial tube in a radial or a bias tire. But if you put a bias tube in a radial tire, then it's kind of the opposite, because the tire will flex like this. The tube will flex like that if it's a bias tube. And that'll cause friction and cause the tube to fail within the tire. So you want to check first. And the same scenario goes with a radial tire. It's going to have an R in it, in the name. And you want to ensure that the tube is a radial tube to go in that radial tire, because you cannot put a bias ply tube in that radial tire.
All right. The next question is, people that are running, BMW and Triumph, they have certain models where the spokes are on the outside where they're tubeless. Yes. And then if you see spokes on the inside, you're pretty sure that it's a tube tire. But I've had some friends say, I don't go off-road and I want to make tire repair easy if I puncture out on a trip or tour. I'm thinking about making my tube rim tubeless. Can you share some thoughts on that, the good and the bad and the ugly?
I don't recommend making a tube type rim tubeless, because there's always movement within the tube, within the tire, and within the wheel. And eventually, whatever substance you put in there to seal where those spokes are in that tube can wear off. And you get two scenarios. Usually, this one first, the tire fails because of insufficient air pressure to carry the load. And then the first thing that happens is you get a slow leak, even if you've got a tube in there, because those spokes are going to damage the tube inside of the wheel. So nowadays, the great thing, I had a discussion with Harley Davidson about this many moons ago, and they were asking the same question you just asked. Should we have a tube type rim spoked for the classic guys that can take a tube or can take a tubeless tire? And I said, yeah, you need a wheel that's designed for a tubeless tire. Not saying that you can't put a tube in it, but you can. But if you're going to use no tube in a spoked wheel, you need to use a tube type spoked, a tubeless spoked wheel, so that it holds that air pressure the same as a non-spoked wheel would hold that air with the tire seated on the wheel.
I have been on some YouTube videos and it seems like it's always in the UK, where they're coming up with ways to seal the spokes on a tube rim to make it tubeless. And they sell kits for that now. And I don't know if they're approved by anybody, or they're just, hey, because that could be a reliability and a accountability issue. What's your thoughts on some of those kits that are out there?
There's no wheel manufacturer nor motorcycle manufacturer that I'm aware of here in the U.S. that says, yes, you can do that. Also, from a liability standpoint, something happens. You've got a rider that not a family member, or a family member in some cases, that's riding with you on that motorcycle, and something goes wrong. Not saying that something will, but something may go wrong, and you guys go down, then that family member or friend or whoever, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, can seek the help of an attorney, and you will lose that. They'll hire somebody from me or somebody on my staff, and you will. We have a case like that right now, believe it or not, on a bigger bike, on a Gold Wing, where something like that, an older Gold Wing of 1500, where something like that happened, and it was a family member riding on the rear of the motorcycle, and they're now suing. Well, it's settled. They went ahead. The insurance paid for it, but they got sued by the passenger.
All right, to circle back to the bias versus radial, when is it not acceptable to put a bias belted tire on a bike that came equipped with radials? Or is there a scenario like that?
Let me think about it. There's no real scenario other than the radial is going to handle better than a biased. Okay. If it's a heavier bike, that weighs a little bit more in your favor. If it's a lighter bike, then it doesn't weigh in your favor. Now, if it's a more off-road oriented bias ply tire, you never want to put something like that on a motorcycle that's came with a radial tire, because the tread lugs are taller. They're more like a dirt bike. And you get that tread squirm when you're on the road, which hurts the handling of the wheel, hurt the handling of the motorcycle, probably in a high-speed turn. And you will go down because you're going to get that tread squirm. You're not going to have the friction rate on that bias ply off-road oriented tire that you would have had on a radial tire.
That sounds pretty good. I had one more question about when, and I saw this recently on Facebook somewhere, and there was a discussion on installing a tube into a rim that's made for a tube, and there was two lock nuts. And I thought, well, geez, what a strange conversation, because they showed one picture where both lock nuts were on the underside of the rim, and another one showing the lock nut on the bottom of the rim, and then the other lock nut securing it on the top of the rim. And there was a conversation about which way was proper. And I'm thinking, well, you don't want that stem to be moving, causing it to maybe rip or something. So in my mind, there's a nut on the top and a nut on the bottom, but maybe I'm not right. I don't know.
You're correct. Definitely in that situation where you've got lock nuts or washers on a rim that you're on a tube that you're trying to install, definitely read the instructions, because some manufacturers say what you said, some say both on the top. But typically you have one on the top and one inside to keep that valve stiff or upright the way that it's supposed to. Or if it's an angle valve, you don't want centrifugal force damaging that valve, and that's what could happen.
Last question before I let you go, and then we'll announce what next topic will be in November. And of course, we're going to do this once each month, and I can't just thank you enough. I know you're extremely busy, and it's because of our friendship over the years that you've found enough time to let the knowledge that you have out to our members at the Motorcycle Sport Touring Association. But one of the last thing I wanted is I've noticed, and in Northeast Ohio, and we're going to get into this more in the next couple of months, we've got an awful lot of people that ride off-road and with street legal, enduros, and sometimes they're just pure off-road bikes like the KTMs, the Gases, the Beta. But I noticed on the tires that there are DOT compliant knobby tires, and there are not DOT compliant tires. What scenario, or is there a scenario that will allow you to run a non-DOT tire on a bike that would be a street legal, sort of like enduro kind of bike? Or is there no? There
is no. All laws say that if you, regardless of motorcycles, whether it's a dune buggy or something, if it's going to be operated on our streets, highways, and byways, it is mandatory. It's not optional that it has to have a DOT. And when you read the DOT, the thing you need to be concerned with are the last 4 digits of that DOT. There'll be 11 to 13 digits right after the word DOT. And the first 2 of those 4 will tell you the week that tire was made, and the last 2 will tell you the year. So it's got, if it's got 5122, then that tire was made in the 51st week of 1922. But one of the things you want to be aware of, especially if you use any used tires or older tires, if there are only 3 digits numbers on the end of that DOT, you don't want to use that on your motorcycle, because that means that if it had, for example, 512, that was pre-2000. And that tire was made probably in 1992 on the 51st week. And after 10 years for your cars, and I want to talk about the laws concerning the age of a tire.
Okay.
So let's talking about the DOT. On vehicles, cars, trucks, whatever, here's the standard. It's not a law, but it's the standard. That after 6 years, that tire has to be removed from the wheel and inspected internally and externally. Up to 10 years, then it has to be removed from service. Motorcycles, I'm going to say different than my experience, because there's a lot more stress on a motorcycle tire. After 6 years from the date of production, it needs to be removed. And it doesn't matter how much tread is left. I mean, 230 seconds is the law for everybody once you get tread down to 230 seconds. But it's irrelevant when it comes to how old the tire is. And if there's cracks, you guys know it as weather cracking. The official name is ozone cracking. If you see any of that on there on a motorcycle tire and it has different severity, have it checked out by a motorcycle shop and let them tell you if that tire is still usable. And typically you will see ozone cracking if the tires were stored inside a building next to an air conditioner unit or something like that. That actually promotes ozone cracking. And but on a motorcycle, you've only got 2 wheels. Anything looks weird, you need to consult your local dealer, or you can email me. My email is easy to remember, the Tyre Guy, with tire spelled with a Y, at yahoo.com. Email it to me, send me the picture, and I'll tell you if that tire is still usable for no charge. That's a free service that we would offer. As a matter of fact, one of the guys that works with me used to be the test engineer for Dunlop tires, for all the tires that went on Harley Davidson. And usually we peer review everything. And if there's something that I don't know what it is, this guy will know. He will know exactly what it is.
That's interesting, because I helped out a friend, Bill Baumberger, that owned Newcastle Harley Davidson a couple of years ago. I pulled a 4 or 5 month stint to help him out until he could get some other employees there. And when I went in the back, I saw the Dunlop tires, and they're all stamped with the bar and shield on them. And I'm like, boy, there's a deal. There's a deal somebody got. And I'll tell you what, it isn't a deal for you and me, though. I mean, when you buy them, they're, you're chunking in some money, especially if you're changing rear tires on a bagger bike. You're spending some coin,
My son's tires on his Ducati are about $900 for two.
Oh,
We always change them two at a time. One other thing I wanted to cover real quick, Larry. Another example that I have here is a dual compound tire. And I wanted your people to understand when we say dual compound, you've got two different compounds. So the compound here and here is one type of compound. The compound in the center is a different compound than the two on the side. So when you're in a full lean on that side, you got a more aggressive compound than you would have in the center. That's set up for people who ride more upright. But now you got tires with 3 or more compounds on them if you're riding on a motorcycle.
Well, that's one of the topics we're going to get into next month, but I don't want to let that go without asking a quick question. When you're looking at 2 or 3 triple compounds on a tire, when we're talking heat cycles, especially in racing, when you've got warmers on them and how many heat cycles and stuff like that. But I know just from watching the tire pressure sensors just today on my cruise, what the different because I just inquisitive what the temperatures are when it's 48 degrees and this and that. When you have a double or a dual or a triple compound tire for street, and say you're just in an average moderate day where it's in the 70s, how long does it take for something like that has more than one compound to heat up? Is there a variable that you can plug in? I just don't want people to get out and get going and then right away lean something over pretty steep, almost to a knee, and then slide, lose control, traction.
You want to get that tire up to, the road temperature is always going to be warmer than ambient temperature or the temperature of the air that's outside. If you can get that tire up to 10 or 20 degrees higher than the ambient temperature, then that tire is still good. But if you've got a tire that's running 50, 60, 70 degrees over ambient on the street, that's a problem. You probably don't have enough air in that tire, especially if you've got a big cruiser or something like that. Right. And that's one thing when we were talking about bias versus radial. Radial tires dissipate heat much, much, much quicker than bias ply tires do. So if you got biased, if you switch over to biased, expect if you've got one of those temperature sensors in there, those tires are going to run warmer than the radial tires did.
Well, in next month's series, we're going to talk and get into the weeds a little bit more about sport touring versus touring tires. How air pressure affects not only the handling, but the wear, what the date codes mean. Let's talk about the various compounds. So we're going to get into that. And then I've been getting some questions from a lot of local dirt riders, and I'm compiling those questions that I'll send to you at the beginning of November so that we can also address some of them. But some of them have to lower their pressure so much so that they can have grip that they're having trouble with not only the tube moving or not flatting, things like that. And I'd suggested, because one of my friends, his son is a professional in hard enduro. And boy, if you ever wanted to get into a sport where if you saw a picture in a dictionary, hard enduro, you'd probably be in the hospital somewhere, with a crutch or something. But they use bibs, especially on the trials bikes, professional trials riders. And so next month, I wanted to get into more dirt tire situations. And I would encourage everybody that is going to be watching this video that TJ Tennent has graciously come on each and every month to help out the riders on the Motorcycle Sport Touring Association. But he also will take your questions and we'll address them each month as we go on. So you can reach him at and it's TYRE, the Tyre Guy at yahoo.com. And of course, he'd be gracious enough to not only reply back to you, but we would incorporate them into our next video. So that about wraps it up for the October MSTA newsletter. And we want to thank TJ Tennent, the man, the myth, always the legend, for stopping by. And I look forward to seeing you. And I'm going to keep ingratiating myself because one day I'm going to get over there and I'm going to get that Ferrari.
You're welcome to. The number of people that I actually like, Larry, are down to 2, and I can count both of them on one thumb.
Well, I appreciate that's a heck of a compliment coming from you. TJ, be well, and thank you again for all of the time that you devote to all of the motorcyclists and the car and truck people, helping them get answers to tough questions about tires.
Anytime, Larry. You've been a friend of mine. I consider you a friend for a long time now.